Hello and welcome to this video looking at the nStep methods, a very popular framework of project management delivery methodologies provided by Project in a Box, free of course, as are most of our standard methods, and great for aligning the methodology to the type of project that you're delivering. So let's have a look at this, which is an indication of the type of methods we provide and the products and which ones are supported where. So green blocks tell you that it's supported, as they are here, across all of our versions. You might get some slightly different experience because the functionality is different in each of the editions. Some of them we don't provide because they're essentially multi-user, or we don't provide customization within Community Edition, and some of them are commercial add-ons. But we're going to be focusing here on 1, 3, 4 and 5 step, as they are known the nStep methods. So let's just briefly review the development of nStep. There's a video here showing you all this in more detail from when we originally developed the approach, but we're just going to recap that slightly. And what we've got here is an indication of the type of projects through the organisation, the distribution of them, the number of projects and the project complexity. So most organisations have a limited number of complex projects, but they're often the very expensive ones, and often those are managed with formal methods, planned methods like Prince2. But then as we go down from there into actually the vast majority of projects that organisations deliver, we use the nStep method to pick up different steps of complexity for different types of projects. So we've got 5-step, 4-step, 3-step, and then often most organisations below a certain level don't consider things to be projects, and that often means they're not really managed in any structured way at all. And so there we have the 1-step method, and once we've found people start thinking about that as a thing that they can manage within the same confines and tools and frameworks that they use for their real projects, there's a lot of things that become identified there as things that are delivered in that way. So that's the 1-step area. So let's have an overview of that. We'll start with the 1-step and build our way up. So this is the sort of navigation diagram. It's got 1-step, deliver. It's a business as usual activities. 1-step. It's got limited data collection and reporting. So we're not collecting information on things like benefits. Things like finances will be optional. We do suggest collecting task, risk and issue information, and that means you can blend people's allocations of work via tasks in with the resource demand for all the other projects as well. And often organisations might have hundreds of these 1-step activities and 40, 50, 60, 70 real projects. Then we come to the 3-step method. This is the first what we consider to be real project. It's a single delivery stage, so we've not got multiple deliverables here, and that's what allows it to be a simple start, deliver, close activity. We do include a sort of pre-project step, which is project concept, where you might be going through and identifying whether the project is worth doing or not, and many organisations have that sort of activity. For some organisations that's a sales activity, and then they're delivering the project they've won. For others it's an idea or an approval activity, and then they deliver the project once there's a business case for it. So you can use that in either way as you wish. This does have full data collection for reporting. Then we move up to which is by far the most popular in use method, which is the 4-step method. This has multiple delivery stages, so there's a slight change here from where from the previous iteration of the nStep methods in terms of how this is structured, but we've got the same pre-project concept, a start, a manage project activity where we're managing the whole project, moving in and out of stages, and then a separate management of the stage more specifically, and then a closing out of the project. Again, full data for reporting. Then at the top end of the scale we've got our 5-step method. Again, like the 4-step, multiple delivery stages, concept plus 5 steps. We've got the additional direction step here, which is about increased oversight and governance on the project for your really much more complex projects where you're going to go through a much more significant perhaps startup. So there's extra documentation here for setup, start, and for the governance process around that, and that's the governance all the way down through the project, the managing of the project and the managing of the stages as well. So that's the nStep method and how it develops from things that aren't really even projects at all, down at the 1 through 3, 4, 5. What we've tried to do is, I mean, obviously, really a project methodology is a continuum, and there are all these points across it that you might be. But we've tried to group these into typical points that we see projects often being run as, i.e. simple one delivery step, more complex multiple delivery steps, etc. So we've grouped that around those areas, and as I've just described that's available on all of the products, Community Edition, Personal, and the multi-user platforms, Small Team, Enterprise, Live Editions. When we go to our multi-user platforms, though, we offer some slightly extra things here. So and that's because there's different functionality which allows us to do a little bit more with them. So when you go to the multi-user platforms, you can in fact move projects that are in flight already, or activities that are in flight already, backwards and forwards between 1-step and 3-step. Now that's because we've found at an organizational level where people are not just running a personal tool but many projects with multiple users. People might create a project, or create an activity thinking it's a 1-step. This is the most common occurrence, but actually they realize then after a while that really it is a project, it's more substantial than they thought, and therefore all the documentation is in place. They can upgrade that and it will flip into a 3-step mode with the extra documents showing and available for working on. Vice versa, if you've got a 3-step project and you realize actually it doesn't really need to be a project, it could just be a business as usual activity, you can downgrade it to business as usual activity 1-step, and you can then just see a more limited set of documentation. So the movement between those, which are the ones that people most often miscategorize. Then the next point is that we've got the 4-step, which, as I mentioned, is by far the most popular approach. When you're in multi-user, you can have 4-step straight, where you immediately come into the whole methodology being open, or you can have 4-step demand. And when you run a 4-step demand type project, what you first get is just the concept phase. So you get a slightly expanded concept phase with some idea documentation, allowing you to document the proposed project, and then a hard gate, and the project cannot progress into delivery until it's been signed off and sanctioned by the organisation. And so once that has happened, you then fall into the traditional 4-step method with all of its standard documentation available. But it's to allow organizations that run a demand process to match that in the system. You could do the same sort of things for the other methods. We've done it for the 4-step method off the shelf because in practice that's the one most commonly used, I say, and it's the most flexible one, because you could run it with just one delivery stage and essentially be running something very much like a 3-step, or you could add in extra documentation and be running it very much more like a 5-step. So it fits that boundary very nicely. The other thing to say is that the multiple stage projects here, the 4 and 5, when you run them in Community Edition, you can only add a standard planned type stage, so one type of stage. When you run them in Personal Edition or multi-user platforms, there are 4 different pre-configured stage types available. There's a planned stage, there's an agile stage, there's a procurement stage, and there's a desk study stage. And you can add mixtures of those into your project. So you can have a 4-step project which has perhaps an agile stage, because you might be doing some prototyping, perhaps a couple of purchasers, and then some desk study reviews. And so you can build up your project with the project body being the same but different delivery types within it. And the same on the 5-step, you can do that, and the same as I say from Personal Edition, Small Team, Enterprise, Live Editions. Now on all those versions you can also add in your own, if you want to, your own stage types to the pre-existing methods. So everyone does purchasing in a slightly different way. You can personalize those things to drop those extra content areas in. So that's an overview of the nStep methods 1 through to 5 and some of the differences between the different platforms you might run them on. This is all available off the shelf, so that pre-configured set of documentation is all there. and in your product when you buy it, whether that's community, personal, small team, enterprise, live editions, it'll all be there ready for you to go. We've documented all that so that there is what we call a methodology playbook, which lists out all the management products that are used at the project level and at the various different stages. This is the 5-step one, showing you which ones appear in which process step. Some of these are templated, some of these are placeholders for things that you might collect as you go through. So that's all laid out for you, and that's a really good starting point for you to either understand the method that you're which one to use and how to deliver it, but then also for you to personalize that yourself. So you'll see there is good logical progression between those steps, and that allows you to then easily personalize that to match your own requirements. Of course, what gets delivered into the project is a set of templates when you create it. Here's an example of one. This is the PID template. The templates that we use here are the official Prince2 templates that we produced on behalf of Axelos and are allowed to reuse within our products. Now you can then take those and use them on yours. You can replace them with your own templates if you want to. You can put in personalized templates into these methods if you want to, but there are a standard set of templates there. We've settled on the Prince2 templates because they're pretty well understood by most people, and in fact many organizations are using the sort of full Prince2 method up at their big complex projects, so it makes sense to use some of the same templates down in their lighter, less complex projects. So that's a sort of theoretical overview of nStep. What we're going to do is go and have a look at a couple of these in practice. We're going to use Personal Edition as a sort of good midway point to focus on, and we're going to have a look at the 4-step method and the 3-step method there. So let's go and do that now. So here's my Personal Edition. I'll just fire that up, and I can open an existing project, and here I've got some example projects. I've got a 4-step project here, and you'll see it opens using that framework that we discussed earlier. If I come into concept, it shows me the documentation associated with the concept part of the project. I've got some hints and tips telling me what I might do, and immediately I can see that it's offered me a template for the project mandate, although of course I could drop in another file, and it's also offered me a place to store my communications. So there's an empty placeholder, so I know where to put the things that are coming in, and I can simply drop them into that space using add file or drag and drop, depending on the type of product we're using. So pretty straightforward that, and as we progress down through and I come to, for example, start, well, I still need the mandate because that's now the input into my start process, and I still need to see my communications, but now I've got other things. I might set up some appointments, some plans, and I've got some templates for all that sort of thing, and benefits management and setting up my PID, and so it's taking me through all those things and laying them out as I need to do them as I progress down through the various steps in the project. Now, as I mentioned, stages, this is a multi-stage project, and so it doesn't currently have any stages in it because we don't always add stages right at the very beginning of the project. We might add them as we get to that point where that's relevant. So I'm going to come in here and add a couple of stages. We'll add a standard planned type stage. We'll also add an agile activity, and we'll add a purchase, and we'll do those three so we can see the differences between them. So when I come back now and refresh my tree, we can see here that I've got in my stages area the 3 different stages. Of course I can come back and add some more later on if I want to. Now there's nothing in terms of documentation that's relevant when we're up at concept or in start, but as we come through to managing the project, it's saying, well, now we need to be setting up the stages that we're going to deliver within the project, and so we can see the documentation that's relevant for that. Within my planned type stage, I've got the product descriptions. I might want to be setting up communications between the people running the stage and the project team. I've got stage plans and perhaps end stage reports, etc., because you'll see this process backwards and forwards between managed project and delivering stages. When we run through to close, we're coming straight out of managed project. So this is the interaction between the stages, if you like, and the project. particularly from a governance sort of perspective. When we're running an agile activity in here using a turn, we've got time boxes, prioritize requirements lists, etc. Different sort of documentation, but in a similar sort of interaction. And when we've got procurement, this one's provided empty actually with no templates because it varies. The way organisations do procurement varies so much. But of course you could put templates into your one to match your organisation's procurement approach. As then we come down to deliver stages, we find we've got really very little up at the top in terms of documentation we need to consider, and most of what we're doing here is delivering down at the stages. And in practice, I'm probably going to be delivering maybe one stage at a time, which would be a typical Prince 2 type way of doing it, but there's nothing to stop you here having stages running in parallel, because we know many organisations will do that sort of thing. Not necessarily directly in parallel, but perhaps overlapping from time to time. So that's a typical 4-step method. Here it's all set up in Personal Edition, ready to do reporting for you with the data sources, and we'll see more about that if you look at the Personal Edition video or videos on reporting for the other versions. So let's have a look at the 3-step just as a comparison. So I'll come back and open project, and we'll choose a 3-step. So we can see different color, different diagram, different type of method. Starts off in much of the same way, and that's, as I say, about getting consistent flow of documentation. Often people start working on smaller projects first, and as they grow in experience they start to work on more complex projects. So if they're finding that as they move from a 3-step type project to a 4-step project, much of the content is the same, but there's a few new things, that really aids the learning and development approach of the project managers. So we come to start, and we've got the start documentation much in the same way as before. Of course, we're not using stages, and it tells us here stages not used. When we come to deliver, the things that we would have been working with in the delivery stages, such as work packages, product descriptions, etc., highlight reports, are held here within the main body of the project. So it's a much easier structure to work with because you're not having to dive in and out of the stage elements. And then we come through to close, of course, and we've got our closing out documentation. All of this with hints and tips as we go through, all using easy to follow standard templates. So it's pretty straightforward to use. As you can see, adding a new project is also straightforward. I can come here and add a brand new project, which I'm going to call Malc Project 3-step, like that. I choose the method I want to create the project from, and it's created immediately. So we've got we can come back and open it, and we'll see our content. It's going to look exactly the same as it did in the last one we looked at, because it's all coming from a template. You're getting exactly the same documentation dropped in each time, but we can see we're in running that different project here, and if we started to make changes to this, obviously it would diverge from the previous one. So that's a quick introduction to the nStep methods. I hope you found that helpful. Like I say, there are plenty of other videos taking you through the detail of how to use the products, of course, and diving into much more detail about the origin of nStep and why we think it's very relevant to the way organisations deliver projects, and it brings the best out of standardisation whilst retaining flexibility within your project frameworks. Okay, thank you very much.